Good afternoon, patrons, and welcome to the January sort of 2019 Patroncast. I almost said 2018. I very almost said 2018. It's going to take me a little bit of time to actually start getting into the habit of saying 2019. So, January's done. Yes, January. The thing I think we can say about January is it's dead now. That's the important thing. It's dead. We've killed it. In case you don't know, by the way, January is, it's a very bad month for YouTubers, and I think many people know the reasons why. It's mainly to do with the fact that, in January, a lot of stuff goes wrong for, particularly actually gaming on YouTube in general, but gaming on YouTube, because a lot of games come out between September and November into early December, so there's a lot of new releases to cover, and a lot of people are looking for coverage of those new releases, and also because there's so many games coming out, there's a whole lot of publishers who want to advertise their games, so a lot of people want to buy ads in front of videos. Then you get into January and very little comes out, so no one really wants to buy ads in front of videos, and there are less people actually looking for those videos, there's less new people floating around as well, so it's a very, very quiet month, but that's not really what's actually wrong with it in many ways. That's kind of a very technical, mathematical thing that, the ad revenue CPM is technically down due to shifts in supply and demand. That's why it happens, but that's not really what makes January a bit of a dispiriting month from a YouTuber point of view. What's quite dispiriting about it is you can put in the exact same amount of effort and you can look at what you're making and think this is just as good or better as anything I've ever made, but you get a lot less out of it. And I don't know what I've done. This January's been particularly poor, and I'm not sure. I think I might have done something to upset the algorithm, and I need to do a bit of a deep dive into the analytics to try and figure out what's going on there, because January's been pretty slow for us. It's been pretty darn slow, and it's always a bit slow. This year feels a bit more severe, so I'm not sure if maybe my little break from live streaming upset the algorithm. Maybe YouTube does something quietly back end to slightly promote channels that live stream more or something. I'm a little bit unclear about that. But it's been a slow month, which is a bit of a shame. Because if I look at what we've actually produced, I think it's been a great month. I think we've made some really, really nice videos. Railway Empire was this last month. And Thief Simulator, I think was a great video. Y2K I thought was fun. I really kind of thought, even though it was quite short, the Resident Evil 2 demo thing we put together was fun. Atom RPG came back. That was a really fun video. A lot of people really like Danger Kickface. Danger Kickface was a great character. John Schaefer's At the Gates and some more Hitman and Mercenaries 2 World in Flames that went down really well. And then Wargroove came out. And of course, we had ourselves a little preview of the new Total War game, Three Kingdoms. We got ourselves early access to Civilization 6 Gathering Storms. I think we did a lot of stuff right. I think we did loads of stuff right there. And, we've kept some nice Fallout floating around. We've kept New California floating around on Sunday. Fallout 76 came to its end at the beginning of the month, freeing up a lot of spots for us to do more one-offs. We've done loads of one-offs, and generally, doing loads of one-offs is a good thing for the channel. That actually goes down really well when we do more one-offs and slightly less in the way of series, but hasn't worked out so much in January 2019. So, basically, as a result of that, under normal circumstances, if we didn't have Patreon, this would be panic stations, because with views being down and new subs being down and all sorts of stuff being down, you'd be panicking at this point. But thankfully, you guys are here, which is marvellous. So yes, this is kind of, Patreon appreciation month in flipping particular. January, that always is true, but this is particularly true. Thanks, guys. Thank you so, so much. So yes, just imagine me right now tossing some confetti in your face and then, going to get a dustpan and brush and then, sweeping it up. Because it'd be very rude of me to toss confetti at you and then, leave you to clean up the mess. That'd be unacceptable. So I would do both of those things in succession. So yes, imagine that. January, bit of a dodgy month. I'm hoping February will be better. I've put together a little bit of a plan to try and actually get February into better shape. There's things I can do that can, make it more likely the channel will get back into a very healthy place. If we do, big, interesting, more likely to be, spread around and shared a bit videos, then that's more likely to work out for us. So I'm very determined that the first big video essay on the topic of Fallout 76 is going to launch within February. I've kind of got it vaguely down for maybe February 16th, which might be a bit ambitious because I haven't even 100% finished the script yet. But I'd like to think, potentially Saturday, February 16th. That's the day I'm thinking about right now. So yeah, that could be a fun week, because I've also actually picked out, it was actually Claire that found this for me, I've picked out a visual novel for Valentine's Day. So I'm hoping we can get our hands on that, because that could be something very, very fun indeed. So, yeah, could be some fun stuff floating around, could be some fun stuff. And hopefully that'll help shore things up a little bit. But you know what? It's fine, because thanks to Patreon, we do actually have this nice little baseline of revenue coming in. So even if the channel has a bit of a dodgy month, and we have had a bit of a dodgy month, we're cool. It's fine. Thanks, guys. In fact, let's move on to the questions at this point, and I think I will begin at... Let's begin at the most recent, actually. I'll start at the newest and work backwards on this occasion. I'm waiting excitedly for the Crusader Kings 2 revisit of the family tree. Yes, that's a thing I totally forgot to do. I said I was going to do, then I totally actually forgot to do the epilogue for Crusader Kings 2. So, at this point, because it would be a bit awkward to just kind of do it completely at random, what I'll probably do is... either I'll merge it into some form of Crusader Kings 2 live stream at some point, or if I was covering, like, you know, a new expansion or patch or whatever, I'd kind of merge it into that. Or I could merge it into a trailer for Crusader Kings 2 the next time we actually go back to Crusader Kings 2. Because, you know, we'll definitely be returning there at some point. Like, I'm not sure 100% exactly when. Because, yeah, Stellaris is going to wrap up at some point over the next few weeks, because we're getting towards the end game there. I'm kind of hoping that will happen conveniently at about the right time to lead straight into Total War 3 Kingdoms. After Total War 3 Kingdoms, I don't really know what's next. Kind of, the two things I'm vaguely musing on would be... okay, three things I'm vaguely musing on would be Rome Total War Barbarian Invasion, which has been long requested, and I think would be a really fun thing to actually bring back. Though that would be two series of Total War back-to-back, albeit different Total Wars. Then, of course, there's Crusader Kings 2, coming back in some capacity or other. And there's a couple of different runs I've got in mind for that. I'd like to do a big political run for that. So I'm still very tempted by, like, a Byzantine Empire, working my way up from being, like, the lowest low count I can find and trying to eventually make myself emperor and lock down that and diddly-diddly-dee, restore the Roman Empire, all of that good stuff. That sounds fun, because then I've got an actual proper end game objective to work towards. So that's interesting. Or maybe Civ 6 Gathering Storm, of course. We had the preview a few days back. So, I don't know whether that could come back as... maybe that could be like a live stream. Or maybe that could be like an actual series. I don't know. I'm not sure what I'd want that to be. I'm enjoying Civilization 6 recently. And Gathering Storm adds a bunch of really fun stuff. So... I'm not sure exactly what I want to do with that. So those are the kind of things I'm kind of musing on for after Three Kingdoms is done. And Three Kingdoms, I don't know if it's going to be necessarily that long, because, like, the series for Warhammer 2 wasn't really that long. And if I do 2 episodes a week, if I make that be the Thursday and Sunday slot, it wasn't that long at all, really. So that's going to be sooner rather than later. I'm not 100% sure what I'll do with that slot at that point, but those are the options anyway. And if I were to do Crusader Kings 2, to actually get back to the question, yeah, when I was actually trailing that, I'd probably take the opportunity to actually kind of do, like, a fake epilogue that leads into a trailer for the new series, something like that. That might be fun to do. Have you heard of a game called Crosscode? I had not, but I looked it up on Steam after you mentioned it, and the thing that makes me not sure about it is, though kind of, you know, it kind of says it's all a bit like of a retro RPG diddly-diddly-dee, kind of in the Super NES style, it looks like there's elements of bullet hell going on, and if there's one genre I just can't get on with, it's bullet hell, unfortunately. Like, there's plenty of genres which I didn't really used to be into, where I've tried a few different ones and I've come around to them. Me and bullet hell games just are not friends. I just cannot get into them, and it looks like there's kind of elements of that, so not quite 100% sure about that one. Plus, like, I think the person who's going to make the best video for that sort of game, where it's a deliberately kind of retro Super NES RPG thing, is someone who was super into the Super NES RPGs back in the day. And I wasn't. I had a Super NES, but I was never actually super into the RPGs of that period. Now, the original Super Mario Kart, that was my jazz. I just rewatched the Let's Talk About Fallout 76 livestream, and in it you sounded optimistic you'd finally get a holiday in January. Did you actually get to take it? Okay, that didn't happen, but just today, Claire and I were talking about taking the holiday that was supposed to happen in January before the end of February, or possibly in March, and possibly I'll just keep pushing it back forever and it'll never happen. But there is a vague plan to take like at least one day off just to relax at some point over the next 3 months. Have you ever played the Panzer General games or its modern remake Panzer Corps? I got a bit thrown off by this because I actually looked up the modern remake Panzer Corps, and by modern remake it was back in 2011. So I'm not sure the word modern really truly applies to that, but I suppose it's modern relative to the originals. And no, I missed it at the time because it actually predates Many True Nuts. It predates the channel by 2 years because we only started in 2013 and that game came out in 2011. So that's why we missed that. But if, as you're saying, it's a vaguely advanced war-ish game, except set in World War II, where it's like a turn-based strategy game, you're right, that could potentially be up my alley, so we will add that one to the long list. For Hitman 2016, for a few of the levels you did videos on the story of the level, and I really enjoyed those. Why didn't you make any more, and would you consider making them for Hitman 2 or any of the other games? So, interesting thing, I did actually plan to do those, because those videos actually did pretty well, but in Hitman, not all levels were created equal in terms of the amount of interesting lore that you could find just by pottering about and eavesdropping and doing all the secrets and whatever. So, like, I actually started planning to put one together for Paris, but I realised there was basically very little in it, because once you got to the bottom of the female target, I can't remember her name now, her kind of big plan about how she deliberately gets supermodels together with important people in order to get information and infiltrate them and diddly-diddly-dee, like, there's not a huge amount else there, really. Like, you know, you can dig into a little bit of what the two targets are secretly really getting up to, but, like, that's already pretty much in the briefing, so there's just not much interesting information going on there. Like, the two most interesting levels are probably Sapienza and Marrakesh for that sort of thing. Maybe Hokkaido a little bit, but weirdly, yeah, there's not actually a huge amount of secret stuff going in Hokkaido, and Colorado's the same thing. You can do a little bit of like the backstory of each of the targets, but there's not much there aside from what we already had. So like the videos I made, I felt like they covered the most interesting stuff, because some of the missions there is a lot of fun, interesting secret stuff that you can just kind of dig into. Some of them, not so much. Would you consider making them for Hitman 2 or any other game? Hitman 2 is also a bit on the uneven side, though I can actually see there's absolutely an argument for some levels. Like, I think Miami would be a good one. Whittington Creek would probably be the best, because you could actually structure it by like going from house to house and actually discussing like who lives in each house and what are the secrets of each house. Like, what can you learn about each of those houses, like who lives there now, who used to live there, what are the secret stories if you approach them in all the different disguises, what can you learn about them. So there's probably like something fun to be done there. That might be really interesting. So probably Whittington Creek would be the best. Miami you could probably do a pretty good one for, and Mumbai. Actually, there's probably a fun one to be done with Mumbai, with the relationship between the three different kind of targets. The other levels, not so much. I'm not sure there'd be much interesting to do in Colombia, and the final one on the island. There wouldn't probably be much to do that's interesting there, to be honest. And obviously the first one, New Zealand's very, very small indeed. So yeah, potentially that could come back in Hitman 2. That's actually a really interesting idea, because those were pretty popular. So yeah, that could happen. Am I mad, or are videos getting later and later? Is this a plan to capture prime time in some market? It's all a bit late for the EU. I don't think they've changed recently. Like, typically, if there's one video, it goes out at 10 PM UK time. And if there's two videos, then whatever I deem to be like the main one is at 10 PM UK time, and the secondary one is at 8 PM UK time, so 2 hours before that point, which is, I appreciate, for Central European, that's 9 PM and 11 PM, so I understand that's a bit late for Europe. The reason for that is it's kind of the best crossover time for some of the biggest like countries for viewing the channel, who are basically, the US is actually the top, and then there's UK, and there's Canada, and there's Australia, and I'm sorry Australia, you always get a bad deal. But like when we're talking about UK, US, and Canada, like there's a very fine window, I think, where it's not so late that UK people won't watch it and might still watch it before they go to bed, but it's late enough that US people have started getting home from work and school. So about 10 PM UK time, I think, is pretty much like the optimal time for both of those markets. Because if something that's, say, 40 minutes long comes out at 10 PM, then I think even if people have got school or work or whatever the next day, they might still watch it that same evening. Whereas US people, though obviously there's multiple time zones across the US, but depending on where you are in the US, you might have just got home from work or school, so you might just be wanting to sit down at the end of the day and watch something, so a video that's just come out might be just flipping perfect for them as well. So that's kind of why I go for that slot, and I don't think that's moved recently. It's been pretty consistently that for years, unless there's some form of like daylight saving shuffly roundy that I'm not familiar with going on in Europe right now, where we've kind of become desynced for some reason. But I don't think that should have changed recently. That's the logic behind it too. Have you ever tried Subnautica? No, but I keep meaning to. It's one of those games like Factorio that comes up a lot that I keep meaning to try that I just have not actually got round to yet. So that can't possibly wait too much longer. One of these days there'll be a mini-series for that, don't you worry. Do you have any history with the Kingdom Hearts series? No, I'm afraid I don't, which is why there hasn't been a Kingdom Hearts 3 video. Because I did originally think, because I've got a pretty good relationship with Square Enix and the people that work there, if I'd have requested that, I could 100% have got a review copy early and had a video ready to go at the moment the embargo released and actually had my video out like really early on. I just didn't really feel like it was the right thing to do. Because I know for a fact that this thing has got an incredibly complicated, labyrinthine series of plots that are incredibly difficult to follow if you've not been following the whole thing. It's like, the only thing I could really do would be one joke, which would be playing the game and, oh, this is confusing, I don't know what's going on, which is fine, but I can't really have that sustain an entire video. And like, I think it would just be frustrating to people who actually liked Kingdom Hearts to watch someone come in and blatantly not understand it, which might be partly comedy affectation and partly I genuinely don't understand this because this is a very, very complicated thing where there's been sequels and prequels and a really complicated naming protocol I can't quite get my head around, in fact, and there's been way more than 3 Kingdom Hearts games, even though this one's only called Kingdom Hearts 3. So I felt like I wasn't really the right person to make that video, so I decided to just kind of, you know, quietly step aside and let people who actually know what they were talking about cover that instead. When can we see some Pokemon content? Ooh, excellent question. Now Nintendo aren't being dicks. There's a big old pile of stuff from Nintendo's back catalogue I'd actually like to have a little look-see at, like various Zelda games, various Pokemon games, flipping Eternal Darkness. It wasn't Nintendo itself, but it was a second-party game, so it's kind of covered under the old Nintendo system. All sorts of things I'd like to look at. Like, I wouldn't mind doing a challenge run of some description in Pokemon. I do have one rule set in mind I won't go into because I might like refine it over time. I'd like it to be a bit of a surprise, but I do have something in mind. I do have something in mind for Pokemon, and now you've actually raised it, it wouldn't actually be a bad idea to get that done sooner rather than later, actually, because it could be something a bit fun and different that could give the channel a bit of a shot in the arm. Because yeah, generally as a general rule, like, a series is fine. People who are existing subscribers can 100% love a series, and series can be great. But a series is very unlikely, for the most part, to get, like, new people coming and joining the channel. A one-off is potentially going to get a few more people joining the channel because it can get a lot more views, and like someone who's looking up a particular new game might stumble across your video if it happens to rank well in YouTube and the algorithm decides it loves you, and the algorithm is a fickle thing. Some days it loves you and some days it hates you. This last month I think the algorithm has fallen quite out of love with us, so we need to get that fixed somehow or another. But the big way to actually, yeah, get a channel growing and healthy and generally in a positive state where I'm feeling happy about it is to do the odd, like, special thing. Like a challenge run, like a little kind of, like, comedy skit thing of some description. Something special and different, and sometimes a bit on the shorter side that potentially can get shared around a little bit more. And when I say shorter side, of course, you know, massive video essays do basically the same thing. So like either do more massive video essays or do kind of like, you know, very short comedy focused things, or potentially do some sort of ridiculous challenge run that's never been done before. Like, those things are potentially good for getting some attention on the channel. So, okay, thank you for the reminder. That's worth thinking about. You might have just got Pokemon brought up the rankings there, so well done. And a 2-part question. First part is for me. Would you ever play Elder Scrolls Online on the channel? I wouldn't say no. Absolutely. There's no reason for me to rule it out. The thing about, like, big online games is I feel like they take a while to get into. Because, like, by design, they're very big and very complex and have to be playable for months or years or forever. Like, I think they're very difficult to make, like, single videos out of, because you've barely scratched the surface in your first few hours, so I feel like that wouldn't be a representative sort of thing. So, absolutely, there's no reason why I wouldn't. I've got no opposition to it whatsoever. There's just a question of what form that video would take. Because I feel like anything I did wouldn't be that representative. I mean, I suppose I did that for Star Wars The Old Republic, the Star Wars MMO thing, where I just kind of got to the end of the first big quest planet thing and reached a big landmark in that. And that was a fun video, so you know what? Never say never. Might well happen at some point, but I don't actually have, like, a date or an idea for when that might be yet. I'm in the market for a linen shirt, genuinely. Oh, you have chosen wisely, my friend. Can you recommend a good brand? I mainly just use Marks & Spencer's own brand, because Marks & Spencer's have their own collection of linen shirts, and generally they're very high quality and they're quite long lasting. So they do for me very, very well, and they're actually quite inexpensive. So you can't go wrong with Marks & Spencer's itself for buying linen shirts, and this might be the most British sentence I've ever said in my entire life. Do you ever wish you'd made different decisions during your life, or do you think you've led the best life you could have at this moment? Now, this is kind of two separate questions that got a bit conflated here, because have I always led the best life that I could have been leading, or have I always made the best decisions? No. You don't get into your 30s without making a giant pile of stupid decisions when you were younger, and I absolutely 100% did. And, like, you know, when I was younger and didn't know myself so well and all of that business, 100% I would have, like, you know, regretted a bunch of stuff and worried about it and been anxious about it. But the thing is, where I am now is great. Where I am now is fantastic. Loving where I am right now. So everything that came before it, even if it didn't seem great at the time, that was just part of the journey. So these days I'm very chill about stupid decisions I made once upon a time, because ultimately they've brought me here. And he is fine. Be happy where you are right now, and nothing in the past actually flipping matters. Ooh, that's life wisdom right flipping there. A game I'd love to see is X-Anima, a third-person physics-based combat game. Yeah, I looked up the trailer of this. This looks like this could be a fun one-off. This is one of those games that's got a catastrophically huge level of depth going on, where, like, literally everything's being modelled. Like Scum, but, like, low fantasy RPG-ish sort of thing going on here, where, like, yeah, the exact angle you're swinging a club affects what it does to the person that it actually hits. And, you know, how tough their ribs are based on the calcium content of the food they ate the other day impacts the diddly-diddly-dee, that sort of thing. Yeah, I like games like that, or rather I find them completely terrifying, but they make good videos, so yeah, that's a maybe. Let's add that one onto the long list. How much do you try and stay away from spoilers on the internet when you first start a new series? As much as I can, to be honest. Sometimes I can't avoid it just because, you know, as part of the nature of this work, I have to, like, you know, be reading a lot of, like, blogs and games news outlets just to make sure I don't miss anything, because if something happens, like a game is, like, you know, its release is brought up or pushed back, I kind of need to know about it, and just in case there's, like, a game that neither me or Claire have come across that looks sort of interesting, you know, if it gets featured in one of the big kind of trade press websites or something, then that's a good way for us to find out about new games. So I'm always kind of reading various bits and pieces, and obviously on Twitter, I follow a lot of, like, gaming releases as well, and that means sometimes I can't help but be exposed to the odd spoiler on occasion. Generally, I can avoid it, because for the most part, big releases that I actually care about, I'll be able to get slightly ahead of their general release anyway, and, like, I'll have had the opportunity to play them for a bit before the public even gets its hands on it. So there's a good chance, even if something gets spoilt on, like, launch day, that I might well have already actually played up to that point and be familiar with it, so the spoiler's a bit of a non-issue. It can happen, and if it does, I just don't mention it in the series, so I don't go on to spoil it for anyone else. So it's never been a huge issue. I can't even think of, like, a major example of this happening, to be honest. Occasionally I'm, like, aware ahead of time that something is very likely to happen or going to happen, or something, like, I don't know the details, but I vaguely understand the direction a game is going to go into. But honestly, I don't consider it a big deal, because, like, even if you're not spoiled, plenty of game plots, you can sort of see where they're going to go. You know, like, if you just kind of can tell that a particular character in a game is very likely to be the one who's going to betray you if it's a narrative game, then is that really any better or worse than a spoiler? Because you, just by being aware of the meta-narrative, are aware that a character is likely to do something bad, Is that really any better or worse than actually, just seeing on Twitter, oh yeah, can't believe that character turned out to be an asshole? Doesn't really make a difference, to be honest. So, I've never really found it to be an issue for me, and I don't really go out of my way to try and avoid spoilers. But yeah, as long as I'm just a bit sensible and don't go digging into hashtags for games I know that I care about, never really is a huge problem. Have you got any games in mind for this month's live streams? Well, Civilization 6 Gathering Storm is obviously very likely to make a reappearance just before or after that comes out, depending on the different embargoes, because, yeah, that has a different embargo for live streaming than it does for, video content for whatever reason. I have been thinking about bringing My Time at Portia back, because that's actually released fully these days, and I had a lovely time with that. I think that might make a really fun little live stream. Obviously, we had Wargroove just the other day, so I'm sure that was fun, because I flipping love that game. Another one I've been thinking of is, there's two I've got kind of in mind, because two games that come up a lot I've been meaning to get round to at some point or other is Factorio and Revisiting RimWorld. And I'm not sure if either of them might work quite well as a live stream, because then people who actually know the game better than me can be telling me how to do it while I'm doing it. Because otherwise, yes, those games are very complicated and a bit on the intimidating side. So both of them are kind of floating around as maybes. But yeah, Civilization 6 Gathering Storm is the only one I've 100% locked in. That'll definitely happen on I think it's Saturday the 16th is the most likely candidate for that. Now on that exact topic, someone else also asked, would you consider a live stream for Mercenaries 2? That is such a good idea. That's such a good idea. I think I'm going to start penciling that in now. That's a really good idea. That could happen. Good evening, John. It's my birthday tomorrow, or to be precise, it was your birthday yesterday, because yes, these are not recorded on the same day you actually hear them. But it was your birthday tomorrow, presumably at the time that you actually posted this, and then it was your birthday. Wait, hang on. It was your birthday yesterday, the day I'm recording this. By the time you hear this, it will have been your birthday several days. Happy birthday anyway! And have we been able to rebuild the backlog of videos we burnt in December? A little bit. We're almost there. Next week's looking pretty good already, so I'm feeling a bit more calm on that front at least. So even though we haven't got the holiday in, at the bare minimum, we're not making videos for the same day or for tomorrow at this point. So that's much flipping better than it was, yes. Store-bought shirts or custom-made? Ooh, I'm not that fancy. I'm not sure if I had a custom-made shirt in my life. Store-bought every time. No, clearly you've overestimated how flippin' fancy I am there. John, you didn't cover Ace Combat 7, so I take it that Claire was not convinced by the trailer. No! We did actually request review code for that one. We just never actually got it, which is a slightly odd situation YouTubers can find ourselves in, which is, for the most part, there's more games coming out than we can possibly actually cover when you factor in, regular series that we're going to want to do and, retrospectives to older stuff and indies to keep things mixed up and whatever. So in the event that a game actually comes out, but we simply don't get review code, then very often I kind of just miss it on the day it comes out because, if we didn't get it ahead of time and thus we didn't have time to make the video ready for launch day, then we think, okay, if we were to receive review code from the publisher now, then, there wouldn't be a slot available until next week sometimes. Then we'd be releasing this game that's new, a week after it already came out, so people who want to know about it probably already know about it, so it's not like we're in a desperate rush therefore, and wouldn't it be better next Tuesday or whatever to play a game that actually comes out next week, so it's a bit more fresh. So games that just kind of slip by us and after we've requested a review code we never get it from the publisher, they sometimes just sort of get forgotten and just sort of fade into the background, because as soon as we're past that week, at that point my calendar's moved on. My calendar's just set to 4 weeks, so I don't see last week anymore. Last week is in the past. Screw last week, we don't care about that. So, unfortunately, yeah, we did request review code, but we never got it. So, I never actually made a video for Ace Combat 7, though your recommendation that it has a fun VR mode, that strikes me as 1, terrifying, 2, likely to make me throw up, and 3, probably an awful experience for the viewer, because if it's actually as a YouTube video, a game where something is moving very, very fast indeed, but it's got the additional head bob and juddering of it being a VR headset, I imagine most people would find that very uncomfortable viewing. And 2 questions for Claire. 1, do you think Tabby could beat John and or Dan at video games if she got properly motivated? I'm looking forward to how Claire's going to try and answer that one. And for both me and Claire, what's our favourite kind of alcohol, and more specifically, beer? I'm a cocktail drinker myself. I do like a good mojito. and I do like a Pimm's and lemonade as well. Like, if you can get me a nice mojito or a nice Pimm's, I'm golden. Beer, I don't really drink beer, to be honest. I've never been a beer drinker. If I'm drinking something like that, I'll probably go for a cider instead. I'd rather drink cider than beer for the most part. Claire, over to you for both of them.
Well, I think Tabby could obviously beat John at video games if she got properly motivated, because she would just need to, like, look at him with big sad eyes and he would immediately concede in her favor. I don't know about Dan. I don't know if he would be similarly swayed by a cat making sad eyes at him. Maybe, maybe not. As for favorite alcohol, much like John, I prefer a cocktail or a cider. Specifically, I like really sweet ciders, those bottled ones that have like added fruit flavorings in them. I also am very partial to a gin and tonic. If I'm gonna have a beer, I want like a really light white beer, but it tends to make me a bit sleepy, so I usually avoid it.
John, just FYI, in Fallout 4 and 76, you can turn off floating quest markers in the setting under display. I'm aware of that, but it's a little bit more complicated than that, you see. When a game like, Skyrim or Fallout 4, or pretty much all modern-day Bethesda games, is built with the idea that there's going to be a floating quest marker pointing you at the thing you're supposed to be interacting with, then you can't just turn it off because you don't like the game being designed around quest markers. Because the problem isn't just the quest marker is there, the problem is the game is designed with the assumption that the quest marker is going to be there. So if a game was designed to not have a quest marker, then when you actually got instructions for a particular quest, they'd say, hey, go to this location and then look for this building and then go up to the top floor and you'll find a computer by the CEO's desk and you'll need to log into that to get this information. If instead the game just says, hey, investigate this building, and it doesn't actually ever tell you that the actual quest can only be progressed by going up to a particular computer, and then you turn off the quest marker, which is the thing that points you at that particular computer, then all you know is you're supposed to be doing something in this building, but you don't actually know what it is. So you can't just turn off the quest marker, because sometimes in Fallout 4 in particular, that just kind of leaves you bumbling around not quite sure what you're supposed to be doing. Because you've got a vague idea you're supposed to go to this particular location, but it's very unclear whether you're supposed to kill a particular person or go to a particular chest, which, because the quest is active, will contain a particular quest item. So you just kind of like bumble around not sure what to do as much. So I'm aware you can do that. It's just I don't think that's a solution to the problem of Bethesda games being overly reliant on the idea of a quest marker. If you turn that off, you've got to have something else to replace it, like the Morrowindification of Bethesda games, where the quest actually starts giving you specific instructions, a list of instructions to follow, where you've actually got to, look around and figure things out, where, like the list I was giving you a moment ago, where to investigate Hornwright headquarters, it would say, hey, go into Charleston and find the Hornwright headquarters building, where it would be a big building with Hornwright written in big letters across the top, so you could figure it out, even if you didn't have a quest marker, because if you just explored and went up to a high place and looked around, you'd blatantly see it, and you could just work your way towards it. Then you could go inside, and you'd know you needed to get up to the top floor, because, say, you could go to the reception terminal, look at a map on the wall, and it would say, hey, the CEO's office is on the top floor, so you'd figure it out. That sort of thing would be a lot more interesting, but you can't just turn off quest markers because there's nothing to replace them, is the point I'm trying to get to. My wife Victoria's going for big, multiple-day, multiple-presentation job interviews later in February. Could you wish her good luck? Good luck with the job interviews, Victoria! You mentioned before you've somewhat toyed around with the idea of playing D&D on the channel, potentially through Tabletop Simulator. Did you have anyone in mind that would run the game for you, or would there potentially be space where someone could be Dungeon Master for your game? I'd need to find someone I knew who was Dungeon Master, because I think this would only work if there was a pre-existing established relationship between everyone involved. So I don't know who could be the person that would do that. I do know some people in real life who have done that sort of thing before, I think, but they don't have any experience working with YouTubers or on YouTube, so whether they'd be able to do things in a way that would work to actually turn it into a good YouTube video. Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's an interesting one. That could be a really fun, interesting, big crossover event to do. but I'm just not quite sure how I'd fit it all together. That's why, though I've mused on that many times in the past, I've never been able to figure out a way to actually make it work. The Resident Evil 2 remake is awesome. That was just a statement, by the way. There's no question, it was just a statement. You're right, it is. I have a particular fondness for Ada and how they've redone her now. Because I just love how now Resident Evil 2 works as like the perfect prequel to Resident Evil 4, where when Ada first comes across Leon, you can just sort of like see in the way she's treating him and the way her demeanor changes through the first few times she runs into him, that she realizes very quickly, hey, this Leon guy, he's a kid who's incredibly naive, incredibly trusting, and weirdly obedient, but he's also hyper competent and really good at murdering zombies, but he hasn't got a subtle bone in his body, and if I tell him to go and do something, he will do it by just charging through the nearest door and starting to fire a gun. This guy could be sort of useful to me in some ways, actually, couldn't he? Yes. Yes, he could. Potentially I'll manipulate the hell out of him. And yeah, it's just kind of sad watching Leon being so easily flipping lied to and manipulated by Ada. But her new script is fabulous and it's some wonderful character work, so I do like that about Resident Evil 2. John, what's the weirdest dream that you've ever had? I can't really answer that one, I'm afraid, because I'm terrible at actually remembering dreams. Like, for me, the moment I wake up, the dream's just, like, gone. Like, it is a very rare instance I remember anything from any of my dreams, so I'm afraid I physically cannot answer. What's one food item from any country that you just don't understand why it is so popular with others? I was discussing this with Claire just the other day, I can't remember why I raised it now, but quiche. What's the deal with quiche? Why does quiche even exist? You know what quiche is? Quiche is just a sad pie. That's what quiche is. It's just a pie, but sad. I do not understand quiche. I've never had a quiche I enjoyed. Not that I think quiche are particularly bad. I think a quiche is just... it's just dull. It's just a thing. It's just some slightly unpleasant, squishy, moist stuff in your mouth. It just provides sustenance in the least pleasant way possible. Just, I don't understand how anyone could like a quiche. Like, I don't hate quiche, but I don't understand how anyone could love a quiche. Like, what mad person would ever, like, go into a restaurant or even just, like, go up to a buffet where there were multiple options and actively choose quiche over literally any other food going? I do not understand quiche. Have you read any good books lately? Well, actually, I have been having a bit of a Terry Pratchett kick lately, and I went back to reread some of the really, really early books that plenty of people these days say, oh yeah, don't read those, just skip over those, they weren't very good. So I went back and read The Light Fantastic, which I believe is the second ever Discworld novel. I was pleasantly surprised, actually. There's some really lovely moments in that, so I had a lovely time reading that. So I'm probably going to regret this, because now I'm going to go way too far. I'm planning to read The Colour of Magic next. The very first one. Lots of people don't seem to rank that one that highly. I mean, the thing I'll say for Light Fantastic is there's a lot more active fourth wall breaking and meta stuff than you would find in the later Discworld novels, but aside from that, which can occasionally just kind of slightly take you out of it, yeah, there's a lot of fun stuff going on there, so 100% I'm going back even flipping further. It's award season. What movie and TV shows win the MATN Awards for the past year? I can't really talk for TV because Claire and I just like real trash TV. Alright, the trashiest trash TV going. We're flipping loving SAS Who Dares Wins, a stupid reality show about taking civilians up the side of a mountain and then yelling at them until they cry on Channel 4 at the minute. That's great. I like Hunted as well. Hunted's fantastic, where you get a bunch of civilians and then just make them try and evade authorities for 30 days. Basically, I just like reality TV where you take annoying people and then make them suffer for a month, which may possibly reveal worrying things about me, I don't know. So I can't really comment on TV, but for films, I did see The Favourite not long ago, where Olivia Colman won, I think it was a Golden Globe? I think she won a Golden Globe for that. Yeah, that was really solid. So I hope that does well at the Oscars, because that was really fun. You guys might not necessarily listen to much of it, but what are some rap songs or rap artists that you like or have any interest in? Oh, I'm gonna be honest, I don't know if I have any interest in any. I've just never been into rap music at all, so I don't know. Sorry, I've literally got no idea. I'm going to pass over to Claire quickly now. Claire, do you have, like, any rap music or rap artists you like whatsoever?
Ooh, I'm afraid I also don't listen to much rap at all. In fact, I don't think I've listened to any rap aside from the rap bits in Hamilton for a really, really long time. So I'm sorry I don't have a better answer for you there.
I'm not always well versed in some of your older series. Could you explain the Great Britant to me? Who is she, he, or it? Which series is she from? The Great Britant was a fake superhero I made up during Fallout 3 Kill Everything. If you want to just watch that particular part, it is, I believe, part 8. Was it part 8 or part 9? Whichever part is subtitled Great British Superheroes, which I believe is part 8, which is just basically part of a running joke that I just kind of basically killed the antagonizer from Fallout 3 and stole some of the costume and blended it with some different bits of armor and basically created a new superhero. Where the joke was I was trying to be a superhero, but really I was more of a natural supervillain, as kind of suits the series. So yes, that's from that. A lot of people very fond of that indeed, and it still kind of floats around on the Many a True Nerd subreddit. For example, I believe the little kind of the Snoo, the alien thing up there is still the Great Britant design. So yeah, that still floats around, and now it's been immortalized forever inside Atom RPG, where it's just written on the side of a building in that game for the rest of time, which is flippin' marvelous. If instead of going into classics you'd gone into the sciences, which branch of science would you have picked and why? Well, it would have had to have been biology. And I say that because it's the only one I was any good at. I dropped physics as soon as I was allowed to at school because I could not get my head around some of physics. It just didn't fit in my brain properly. And chemistry I didn't have a problem with, but I wasn't very good at it. So I got my worst GCSE result in chemistry and dropped it straight afterwards. But biology, I carried on into A-level, because at the time, the recommendation that my school gave me was don't just, focus exclusively on one thing, do, mainly focusing in one area, but then do something very radically different as well to show you've got a bit of range. So I did as my A-levels, Ancient Greek, Latin, History, and I needed to pick something else to take to... It was called AS level at the time. I don't know if it's still called AS level. Where you do it in your lower sixth, but not your upper sixth, when you're 16, 17 or whatever. And I was choosing between maths and biology, and I went for biology in the end because I thought a science would probably be a good idea. And I was pretty good at it. I mean, it was fine. I got an A in it, so I never took it any further. But if I was going to take any form of science further, it would have to kind of be biology, pretty much by default, because I wasn't very good at the others. With the PlayStation Classic being released recently, any chance of any videos on it? To be honest, because I never had a PlayStation when I was growing up, I went from the Super NES to the N64, I don't have a huge amount of nostalgia for the PlayStation Classic, so I feel like I wouldn't be the right person to make videos on it, because games like that, I think they're gonna work best if someone who had an original PlayStation and was super nostalgic and excited for those games is the person to do it. Without the benefit of nostalgia, you're probably not going to get that much out of it. So, as a result of that, I'm not sure I'm the right person for it. However, in the event that there's going to be a mini N64 at some point, I will be flipping all over that, don't you flipping worry. Specifically with Metal Gear Solid 1 included, however, would you consider ever doing videos on the Metal Gear Solid series? I'm gonna be honest, I've said this before. Me and Metal Gear fell out on the GameCube after I very excitedly bought the Twin Snakes and absolutely flipping hated it. And it kind of burnt me on the entire franchise. But I should go back at some point and give the rest of it a go. Because just because Twin Snakes was not my cup of tea doesn't mean the rest of it might not be. So at some point I should go and give, a game that's not Twin Snakes a look. Will you ever take a look at Dragon Age Origins? Despite my repeated teasing about it, yes, 100% I will. Because that era of BioWare games was a great era, and they made some really, really cool stuff, and some of it I missed at the time, and I would like to go back and enjoy some of that business. So I don't know exactly when, because I've got some other plans for a sort of similar thing I'd like to do before I get to Dragon Age Origins, but yes, the answer is 100% yes. Despite the amount of teasing I do about this, yes, I would like to do it at some point. I've been trying to get into drinking tea recently, but I've only found I really like green tea so far. Are there any types of black tea you'd recommend? Oh, I'm going to be honest, I'm a bit of a tea pleb. Like, most of the time, I just use standard, completely boring PG Tips Pyramids bags. On occasion, I can be tempted with some Assam tea. Assam can be quite nice, but for the most part, not so much. I'm very much a tea pleb. Claire occasionally goes for Earl and particularly Lady Grey, so that'll be a recommendation from her, I would guess. But I think both of us, for the most part, when it comes to black tea, we don't have a huge amount of variety going on. We just kind of stick with what we know, I'm afraid. I'm wondering if there's any form of special playthrough plan that you could see working for Fallout 4. Oh, it's Fallout 4 You Only Live Once. The next Fallout 4 playthrough will be You Only Live Once. And after New California is done, the next 2 runs I do will probably be back into the main franchise, moving away from the mods for a bit. And it will likely be Fallout 2 and Fallout 4 You Only Live Once. I don't know in what order, to be honest, but probably those are the next 2 series floating around. What's the best kind of cheese? Trick question. The best kind of cheese is no cheese at all. Because if we allow Claire to get her foot in the door with some cheese, next thing you know, she'll be bringing smelly cheeses into the fridge, and then I just need to turn my back for 30 seconds, and there'll be a bloody raclette going on, and everything will stink of cheese forever. So the best way is just to put a stop to that before it starts. So basically ban all cheese. I've been watching some role-playing hangouts lately, and it's really fun when it's well-planned and the players are having fun themselves. Is a role-playing session of any sort part of your future plans? To be honest, it kind of already is. Like, for the most part, I do like kind of slightly getting into a little bit of light role-playing in most of my videos, to some extent. Like, very often I'll pick a direction I want to go in, and I'll kind of double down a particular direction, even if it's abundantly clear it's not actually working, or I ought to change direction, or I ought to respec. Like, Danger Kick Face in Atom RPG was just like a fun idea I decided to just take forward because it struck me as amusing, and that's basically role-playing. It's not hardcore role-playing, but it's there, and pretty much all of my Fallout playthroughs are dependent on role-playing to some degree or another. Crusader Kings 2 and Total War and Stellaris, like all of these series are, to a light degree, roleplay series. So it's not something I'd probably like go out of my way to specifically do, just because I think it's actually kind of part of my day-to-day videos already. Are there any plans to play the After the End mod for Crusader Kings, or just play other Paradox games like Europa Universalis or Hearts of Iron? Probably I would play Europa Universalis 4 before I got into modding Crusader Kings, and probably I'd go back into Crusader Kings and do a new Holy Fury, but with some of the new stuff floating around, playthrough of some description in Crusader Kings 2, before I went on to that as well. Because I've done, actually, quite a few different Stellaris series, so it kind of feels weird. I've done, 4 Stellaris series so far? Mighty Ducks, then... Wait, was Mighty Ducks separate from the Utopia live streams? Yes, because that was Romans. So there was Mighty Ducks, Pax Romana, Tenets of Tabby, and now the Almeta Syndicate. So it feels weird that I've done 4 full playthroughs of Stellaris, but only 1 of Crusader Kings 2. So Crusader Kings 2 might well come back before Europa Universalis 4, but depending on what comes out towards the end of the year, we might be in a good position to potentially actually, start bringing some Europa Universalis 4 in before the end of 2019. John, what are the top games you're looking forward to this year? I want to flag 2 in particular here, 2 very different games, which is, 1, officially, we're only about 2 weeks out from the launch of Crackdown 3, which feels weird, quite frankly. I'm not going to believe that game exists until I've actually played it. It feels like a long-running practical joke at this point. I'm pretty confident when we get to a day before release, they're just going to push that back by another year and reveal, no, sorry, it's not actually ready. We were supposed to, push that back to October months ago. We just sort of forgot. Yeah, I'm not convinced Crackdown 3 actually exists, but we'll see about that. And, naturally, of course, Paradox's new game, Imperator. I'm very much looking forward to Imperator. That's going to be wonderful. In fact, actually, that might be what kicks Europa Universalis 4 out of this year. The fact that Imperator is going to be along at some point or other, and, I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be flipping great. John, what are your top tips for working in an office? Because I'm working until I go back to do teacher training in September. It's only temporary, but September feels very far away. And as an introvert, I'm apprehensive about the whole 9 to 5 office vibe. I would say, honestly, there's there's not much I can really say in response to this one, aside from trying to encourage you to not think of it in terms of the question that you've posed. Because I don't think there really are necessarily top tips for, like, working in an office for the most part, because I'm pretty introverted myself, which I know, like, might sound weird to some of you, because, like, you know, I'm literally a person that basically just broadcasts my opinion about everything onto the internet, and then, like, anything I'm not broadcasting my opinion on in a video, I'll loudly announce my opinion in front of tens of thousands of people on flipping Twitter or Reddit, or I'll do live streams where 1,000 people show up and I try and dance to entertain them. So I know it sounds really odd to say that I'm an introvert for that, but I am actually a very introverted person. Like, I'm very content on my own. Like, you know, if Claire needs to go off and do a thing and it's just me and Tabby here for a week, like, I can basically be fine with that. If I don't have any real form of communication with another human, like face to face or like a phone conversation or whatever for a week, like, I probably wouldn't notice. Like, I'm totally cool with just my own company. But I worked very happily in an office for 7 years before I started doing YouTube as my job. So I'd try and encourage you not to think of an office as a fundamentally hostile environment to an introvert, where the only way someone who is introverted can survive in an office is by finding coping mechanisms or finding, like, you know, the life hack that lets them get by. I don't think an office environment is in any way something that someone who is, just by virtue of being innately an introvert, something they can't actually deal with. Like, maybe I've been lucky. Maybe I've been lucky, and the various offices I've worked in, and that's quite a few offices. I moved around job quite a bit. I wasn't just one place for 7 years. I've worked all over the flipping shop. Like, I can't think of an office I've been in where I actively felt in any way like I was stressed or anxious because in some way a preference I had as an introvert wasn't something that I was allowed to express for the most part. Like, I struggle to find a way to word this properly, because I don't just want to say, just chill out and relax and go with it, it'll be fine, because that sounds like really patronizing, and it sounds like really unhelpful advice, because clearly for you, this is something you're worried about. So I don't want to say that. And, you know, I maybe speak from the benefit. I don't know how old you are and how long you've been in education or work or training or whatever. If you're just starting to do teacher training, that might mean you're a fairly recent graduate, or it might mean you've done something else and, you know, you're a mature student of some description. I don't know. I will say, when I was young, I'd have probably been nervous and anxious in an office environment, but what I learned spending many years in an office environment is most people just want to quietly get on with their job. People don't go out of their way to make other people uncomfortable or try and push other people out of their comfort zones or force them to do something they don't want to do, even if it is something, you know, as minor as saying, hey, we're all going to go for a drink afterwards, do you want to come? Which is something that as an introvert you might not want to do. You might think, I've had enough of being in this environment today, I just want to go home now. Most people, I think, are not going to go out of their way to try and push anyone to do anything. And I think you'll find, like, if you ever do find yourself in a situation where somebody says something like, do you want to do this or do you want to do that? And it's something you're not comfortable with. If you just say, no thanks, I'm good, I think you'll find no one's going to try and push you into doing anything, because no one really has any incentive to try and push introverts to be more extroverted in the workplace. So I think if you just go with the flow for a few days and try not to think about it and try not to dwell on it and try not to worry about it, you'll probably be pleasantly surprised, because I am not the most natural extrovert in the world at all, but I was perfectly fine in an office environment once I got used to it. Have you ever done a collaboration with someone that didn't work out, and if so, who? No, I never have. But then I've not done many collabs because I'm terrible at being a YouTuber, because, like, you know, the one bit of wisdom that gets shared around a lot is, hey, do lots of collabs and make sure you're reaching out to people and collaborating, because that's a good way to grow your channel. And I never do that. And as I was saying earlier, our channel's going for a period of very slow growth at the minute, so I'm just terrible as a YouTuber. I don't know how to do my own job. So I probably should. I probably flipping should, but I'm going to say it doesn't get any easier. Like, just because we've got like 400,000 subscribers, it doesn't get any easier to reach out to someone else and be like, hey, do you want to like do something together? It's still really awkward, and I still don't know the right way to approach that. So I probably should, but no. Anyone I've ever done has worked out just fine. to be honest. I think anything I've ever recorded with another person has ended up being published, either on my channel, or Dan's, or Matt's, or with Up Is Not Jump. And that's pretty much all I've done. I've just done some stuff with those guys. And of course the old charity live streams with Super M, who I haven't heard from for a while. So yeah, there's all that stuff floating around in the mists of time as well. So I probably should. I probably should have all these stories to tell you, because I should be reaching out to people all the time, and sometimes it'll work and sometimes it'll work. But that's just a learning experience and diddly diddly dee. Yeah, I should probably do more of that. Congrats on the success of Fallout 3's Better Than You Think, currently breaking 4 million views. I know, I was hoping that would go well. I didn't realise it would go that well. That has been a very good investment of time. It took flipping, probably well over a week of solid work for, actually way more than that. The amount of evenings I spent scripting that took a lot of flipping work. But it was very worth it, so that was a good investment of time right there. On that topic, for your upcoming analysis video essays, would you consider posting a rough draft of Patreon before making it public so any patrons could critique your critique, so anyone could point out issues that they felt were underrepresented or similar? I'm going to be honest, I don't really want to do that. And the reason is, it's because you're not one person, you're all many people. So if I were to put a summary of my thoughts ahead of time up, then one person is going to find a particular argument perfectly reasonable, and another person is going to find that a stupid argument that they don't accept. And that's going to happen to every argument. Because this is entirely subjective, there's going to be, for every single sentence in the entire damn thing, one person is going to think, well, obviously that's true. That's so obvious, why would you even point it out? And another person is going to think, that's ridiculous. I can't believe you can even say that without your tongue becoming so embarrassed you're forcing it to do this that it decides to cut itself off and flee your mouth. So, yeah. I don't want to do that just because I don't think it would be helpful, because I'd get so much conflicting advice back. I don't think it would actually be useful in any way. So it's an interesting idea, but I don't think it would really work. John, out of interest in your Stellaris videos, how many hours have you put in versus how many hours we actually see? Ooh! Claire is laughing bitterly at this question. So, on average, every part of Stellaris is 3 to 4 hours of raw footage, cut down to somewhere between an hour and a half, because there's a lot of quiet periods, there's a lot of periods I'm just tinkering around with menus and stuff like that. So yeah, there's a lot of just quiet footage on the editing room floor for that series. Is there any chance of a Stardew Valley playthrough, either multiplayer or solo? I have been thinking about doing Stardew Valley multiplayer, picking up on that point just a couple of questions ago where people were talking about collabs. I would like to do Stardew Valley multiplayer. I have been thinking about it, I just need to find the right person to do it with. What are the best tips for new players to Stellaris, and what would you say is the easiest direction to start going in? Okay, I'd say probably, the best new tips for Stellaris is, oh blimey, this is a bit tricky, because I could give you some good tips for the old Stellaris, but new Stellaris, I'm still learning it myself. I suppose, prioritize alloy production, as early as you can, because ultimately, in Stellaris, though they are slowly moving towards more of a political and subterfuge game, right now in Stellaris, everything ultimately comes down to who has the biggest fleet. And who has the biggest fleet is decided by alloys, and alloys is decided by who has the best infrastructure for producing alloys, because alloys are way too expensive to ever be buying. You really need to be producing them yourself. So make sure you've got yourself a strong alloy game. In terms of the type of empire, however, I'd say that one's pretty easy. If you want a nice, easy life, I'd say you want to go for Spiritualist and Militarist, because then you've got yourself a nice, strong fleet, and as I say, it's ultimately all down to who has the strongest fleet. And Spiritualism makes life nice and easy, because one, it's a strong ethos, because it gets you tons of unity, so you get yourself tons of traditions and ascension perks nice and early on. But two, because you've got yourself a massive ethics attraction to spiritualism, it means you don't really need to worry about factions, so there's one less thing to worry about. So you're generally going to have a very happy, stable, homogenous population that are all going to be spiritualists. So it's relatively easy to manage, and it's very strong. So I'm going to say that sort of direction is pretty good. How many new people do you tend to have listening to these Patroncasts each month? You know, I've spent ages digging around in the analytics of Patreon, and it's pretty much impossible to tell, which is very, very annoying indeed. I just can't figure it out. I can figure out roughly, the flow in and out of people, but I can't actually break out how many people who are looking at an individual post are new or not. and weirdly, I can't even find data to the number of people who are listening to the audio post when I actually put the audio up on Patreon itself. Like from YouTube, I've got view data for the unlisted video I put on YouTube, but I don't have any way of telling who's new versus who's not on that. And yeah, there's just no data for that in Patreon. So unfortunately, as far as I can tell, I have physically no way of checking that. How much of your time playing video games is for leisure rather than the channel? Very little, to be honest. Like, some Total War, sometimes I'll nip into old favourites. Recently just kind of playing Wargroove has given me a hankering for the old Advance Wars, so I got the DS out for that, which was beautiful. But yeah, for the most part, overwhelmingly, yeah, if I'm playing video games, it's because I'm actually recording. Like, when I'm not recording, I'll often want a break from video games and screens and whatever, so I'll be doing something like reading instead. I've been on the fence about getting a VR headset for a while, but your Beat Saber video convinced me. Now I have the Oculus Rift, and I'm loving it. Are there any other VR games you would consider must-haves? There's not many must-haves, to be honest. I would probably consider the only other real kind of classic VR at the moment is Superhot VR, which I know you can get on the Oculus Rift because I've actually played the Oculus version. That's just a wonderful VR experience. That's a great little game. John, would you consider doing a better than you think style video on some non-Fallout games? Yes, I've got a very, very, very bare bones thing sketched out for Mass Effect 3 as better than you think, and oh, I'm going to regret doing that, but I think it deserves it. Aside from the disappointing end, there's a lot that Mass Effect 3 absolutely flippin' nails. John, is your Wi-Fi called Many a True Wi-Fi? It is not. Our Wi-Fi is called a random string of just like letters and numbers that it just sort of came being called, and I never bothered renaming it because I don't actually know how, I'm afraid. Very boring. John, you're planning a bank heist and you've got a team at your disposal consisting of two well-known political figures from two different countries, one porn actor or actress, and one character from a 90s sitcom. Who are they and what do they do in your plan? That is a very specific question. Okay, so what I'm going to try and do here is have a spread of talents, because I don't want this to turn into a shooting war. I want to try and basically clear out this bank without there being any violence. So we're going to bring along a variety of different skill sets here. So for example, for the character from a 90s sitcom, we'll go for Joey from Friends, because naturally he can use his spectacular acting ability to just blend in with the bank staff and potentially be able to just sneak in and clear out the vault without anyone even realising they're being robbed. But if that doesn't work, that's fine, because for the porn actor or actress, I'll go for Sasha Grey, just because she's probably the most like famous, well-known porn actress in the world, and honestly I could barely name any, so we'll just kind of go for her. And her job is to try and seduce the people working in the bank. So if we can't act our way in, we'll try and seduce. And if that doesn't work, I'll bring along Barack Obama, because he's very eloquent. So he might be able to talk them into just handing over the money. And for my second political figure, who has to be from a different country, I'll go for Margaret Thatcher, because she's dead and has been for some years. So she's a good distraction, because everyone will be like, oh my god, how the hell did the corpse of Margaret Thatcher get into our bank? How the hell are we going to explain this when the police show up? So if I just need a distraction so the other guys can do their jobs, then that's what the corpse of Margaret Thatcher is for. And I'm kind of hoping that one of those guys will be able to do their job without me getting involved at all. So there's kind of like, you know, multiple tiers to this plan. There are backups inside backups here. That's bound to work. John, what if I told you that I work at an amusement park with a ride shaped like a person on a skateboard, and sometimes we play Skater Boy over that ride? Oh, that'd be amazing. Then you would just be the best person, and whatever theme park that is, that'd be the best theme park. Also, when was the moment you realised Claire was the person you wanted to be with? Oh, that's quite a difficult question. This was 10 years ago. You're asking me to remember a flipping decade ago. But Claire and I were actually just reminiscing very recently indeed. The first time that Claire and I kissed was at a house party by our friends, where basically I had just made my excuses because I needed to go, because this was a house party on one side of London at the time. I lived on the far side of London, and I think I was working the following day, I can't remember, but like it was going to take me a long time to get home. It was going to be like 2 hours on public transport to get home or something, so I had to make my excuses to leave before the end of the party. So me and Claire and a bunch of other people were just like chilling out. And Claire and I were sort of interested in each other, but I can't remember exactly what state we were in terms of like talking about it. And so, like, you know, there were a bunch of people all crowded inside the little kind of the entrance hallway, just kind of saying goodbye. And then various helpful people who were less oblivious than other people just sort of like very helpfully started, you know, just sort of gently taking people by the shoulder and leading them away. So it was only Claire and I left. And that was the first time we kissed. And then I left. I left at that point, because I was leaving already. And I'll hand over to Claire at this point, because she then had to go into the party with various people who blatantly knew what was going on. So I'll hand over to Claire for the remainder of the story.
I'm not sure why John thinks that it was particularly awkward, me going back into the party, because it was a pretty small party. The people there are still among our best friends today. So it was fairly gentle teasing, and I was pretty excited about the kissing. So I was in a good mood to be gently teased by my good friends. In fact, it was our 10-year anniversary recently, and I texted my friend Jen, my best friend Jen, who you might have heard at the beginning of a live stream one time, and I texted her about it to tell her that it was the day of the anniversary, and she said, wow, that's crazy. I still remember you guys smooching in the hallway at my place at that party one time, and that's why John and I were talking about it in the first place. So I don't know, it was pretty lovely. Went back into the party, got a bit teased by my friends, and felt really smug about kissing this, like, cute, nerdy guy who I liked.
Even a bit of a change-up for the next Fallout game, the protagonist wasn't a vault dweller. Would you prefer an Elder Scrolls system where you could have multiple different species, or a single character, Witcher style, maybe a descendant from a Chinese internment camp or something like that? What I would like is, given there's the recurring joke in the Elder Scrolls that you always begin in prison, but we've never actually had that in Fallout. I want that to be in Fallout. I want the next Elder Scrolls game for you to not begin in prison, but for the next Fallout game for you to actually begin in, like, say, an NCR prison if it was set in the West. I want you to begin in an NCR prison, but, like, because of something that's been done to you by another prisoner, like whacked you around the back of the head or something, you've got some convenient New Vegas-style amnesia. So, you know, you don't quite know who you are, and then you can just decide as you're going along through various choices or a little tutorial at the beginning, like what your background is, and build your character like that. Let's do it that way. Let's let people finally think Bethesda have grown out of just having you begin in prison every game, and just move it from one franchise to another instead. Will you be doing any of the Grand Tour game on the channel, possibly as a John versus Claire thing? I wasn't thinking of it just because I've had a little look-see at it, and honestly, I mean, it's fun, and it's an interesting experiment, but as a game, it's not actually very good. There's not really any depth to it, to be honest. It's very bare bones, so I'm not quite sure I could make a good video out of it. Like, I think there's a reason the way that Dan decided to cover it was inside his new quick format, where the video in question was only like a few minutes long, so it wasn't really showing off the game at length, because honestly, I don't think there's much there to show off. So for me, in my formats of choice, where I prefer to do like a long-form type thing, I'm not sure it would work for me, unfortunately. Question for Editing Claire, as we know that John isn't a big podcast listener. It's true, I'm not. Do you listen to the Bright Sessions? It's a sci-fi podcast about a therapist who specifically treats patients with superpowers. Ooh, that sounds cool. Clearly I need to get into this podcast thing.
Ooh, that sounds really, really interesting. I don't actually listen to a lot of fiction podcasts, and most of them are like short fiction rather than a serialized story, but this really sounds up my alley. I'll definitely check it out. Thanks.
John, what's your favourite pizza topping? Pepperoni, I'd say. I do like a bit of pepperoni, but then that on its own wouldn't be good enough. I just like really meaty pizzas, so if you just put like some ham and some pepperoni and slap some bacon on there as well, and like figure out a way of getting more pig on it somehow, yeah, that's the stuff right there. John, if you had the means, which real-life planet, moon or planetoid would you travel to? I'd travel to Pluto so that when I got back, I could say, oh yeah, I went to the planet Pluto. And if anyone ever tried to tell me, John, actually, Pluto's not a planet, I could say, no, I was there. It was definitely a planet. Have you been there? No, you haven't. Okay, well then I'm not sure you're really qualified to judge. I'd say as the only human that's ever been to Pluto, I am the most qualified judge of this. I looked around, very much looked like a planet to me. So, thank you very much. Pluto's a planet again. John, what would get your award for the hardest normal enemy in a game? probably a game I haven't even covered yet, because in Skies of Arcadia, some of the optional sub-bosses that were added into the game when it got the Legends upgrade on GameCube are ludicrously tanky. They have got so much health and can do so much damage. One of them I've never beaten. There's one who's floating around the ice area, and I can't remember his name now, but like, he is ridiculous, and I have literally never beaten him, because he can just murder you so easily and seems to have all the health in the world. Skies of Arcadia has got like a special monopoly on stupidly overpowerful enemies for the optional sub-bosses, which is exactly how they flipping should be, so well done. John, are you considering a Resident Evil 2 playthrough or live stream? No, because I'm too much of a wuss, because it's decided to lean hard into horror and blood and gore and all sorts of things that make me too scared. So I've just watched someone else's playthrough. Because I'm too scared to play it for myself. Because I'm not good with horror games, and I'm not great with like really like properly gross blood and gore. And like, I know there's stupidly ridiculous over the top blood and gore inside like some of the older Fallout games as well. Like Fallout 3 in New Vegas had stupid fountains of blood and limbs flying everywhere. But that was like stupid cartoon violence. It wasn't realistic. But yeah, there's some really genuinely disgusting gore in Resident Evil 2. So I've had to just watch someone else's playthrough so I can look away during the disgusting bit and just like enjoy the new story and all the new set pieces. So I just watched someone else's playthrough on YouTube instead. John, what are your thoughts on Terry Pratchett and his body of work? Well, I must mention this earlier. Yeah, I'm actually going back and reading some of the earliest bits, which are generally regarded as like the worst things that Terry Pratchett ever wrote in the Discworld. And I've been really enjoying them, so you can take from that what you will. Like, I've basically gone back and tried to find the bits everyone says don't read, and I've had a lovely time with them regardless. They're wonderful books that stand up to so much rereading. Like, I must have read, like, all of them 3 or 4 times, and I still get so much out of rereading them again. They're wonderful books. John, I know you aren't super into sports, but did you ever play in a sports team of any kind as a kid? Not much in the way of, like, a sports team. I'm not sure whether you'd call... Okay, is cross-country a sport? Like, and if you're part of a cross-country team, are you on a sports team? Because, yes, I did run cross-country when I was a kid, and I wasn't even that bad at it. And the follow-up question is, do you have any funny stories about this experience? No! The thing is, cross-country doesn't have many opportunities for funny stories. It's just you running in a straight line until you hurt and potentially fall over or vomit. The funniest story I can come up with is if you push yourself a bit hard, once you get to the end, there's a possibility you might have to dry heave for a bit. Which, you know, isn't fun. That's not fun. That's not a funny story. That's just a slightly grim story. So there's various grim stories. But no, cross-country being the process of just running around slightly muddy outdoor areas, not much opportunity for the amusing, unfortunately. John, my girlfriend and I are planning on doing a tour by car in the UK. Do you have any recommendations for anything in the southwest and Wales? Ooh, honestly, despite how much I find the history of Cornwall fascinating, I've spent very little time in the southwest and Wales. Like, I know Bristol is a lovely city from people who have been around there, and I know down in that part of the world on the south coast, like around the Jurassic Coast area, there's some really beautiful coastlines to just drive along and potentially visit. But I don't really know much about the areas of particular interest you might want to visit around Wales or Devon or Cornwall or Somerset. Honestly, not my part of the world. So I'm sorry, but I don't have any recommendations just because I've never really visited them myself in great detail. When can we expect a Nintendo game series? Ooh, hard to say. Also, I don't know what's going to be first. Like, it's probably going to be one of the Zelda games, one of the Pokemon games, one of the Mario Party games, or Eternal Darkness. So that doesn't really narrow it down at all because, like, you know, there's 17 million Pokemon games and 17 million Zelda games and God only knows how many Mario Party games. So that doesn't help in the flipping slightest. But one of those will be first, but I don't have an exact date for them yet. They're not coming up imminently. If you could only listen to one song for the rest of your life, which song would you pick? Okay, it kind of doesn't matter, because any song played on repeat for the rest of your life is going to slowly drive you insane. You're going to grow to hate it. So I may as well go for something that I've listened to a few times that's got a good bit of variety to it. I'll go for the Hyrule Symphony, which was a little orchestral arrangement Nintendo put together at some point and performed for something to do with, I think it was like the 25th anniversary of Zelda or something. Like, you can find it on YouTube, like the full thing's like 30 minutes or something thereabouts. And yeah, it's got like various different Zelda tunes together. And I've listened to it an awful lot. Because it doesn't have lyrics, I can actually have it on while I'm dealing with like writing up scripts or making notes or dealing with social media or whatever. So I've listened to that a lot and I've not got bored with it yet. So I'll go for that. John, in your first playthrough of Fallout 4, you sided with the Institute, claiming that they felt like they were the best option. Do you still think this, or have you changed your mind? And in a similar vein, what's your preferred ending for New Vegas? I do think, on balance, the best ending, out of the endings that are available, is the Institute. That's not to say I think the Institute are like the morally best group of people floating around in the entire Commonwealth. That's probably the Minutemen, because the Minutemen are floating around trying to directly actually address the issues of people. Like, you know, there's a farm that's having trouble with ghouls, so the Minutemen want to send someone to go and deal with those ghouls and keep that farm safe and have people down the ground mutually supporting each other and working together. They're probably doing the best work on the ground. But the only reason I don't say the Minutemen, therefore, is because, according to the rules of Fallout 4, if you don't side with the Institute needs to get blown up. And to my mind, any scenario where you take the technology of the Institute, technology that could blatantly transform the lives of everyone in the Commonwealth, and you just blow it the hell up, is just a stupid, catastrophic waste. Especially when any character can very easily be named the next in line to run the Institute. Like, why would you blow up the Institute? Like, if you're playing as the Railroad, you have to have gone down the Institute quest long enough to have already been named next in line and be fully aware that Sean is already dying. So why on earth would you blow the place up? You're about to take it over. You can just, like, you know, cancel the synth program or give them rights or whatever it is you want to do. And then say, hey, this massive, highly effective hydroponics lab, let's use that to produce food that we can give to people who are struggling with food. If we do want to keep these synths around, we can actually use them to protect people from ghouls and super mutants. We could wipe out the super mutants. We've got the technology and the manpower and everything. We could just, yeah, you could do so much good with the Institute. And, like, I don't say this because I think the Institute so far has been doing a good job. It's been a really important, powerful, rich resource that's been squandered and misused, but given the entire plot of the Institute is Sean dies, you're now in control, so therefore you're the director and you can start making some changes over time, I think you'd be mad to go for any option other than that. So I still think it's probably like the best option, but only because there's no way to say, okay, go for the Minutemen ending, but leave the Institute standing, but somehow reform it. It's kind of a mutually exclusive sort of thing. As for New Vegas, on balance, I probably would still say the NCR just, but then of course, like, you know, the entire magic of New Vegas is there's no easy answer to that question. Every single faction that can win has a very clear, immediate drawback to it that would absolutely give people pause to just say that's a good ending. There isn't really a good ending to New Vegas. There's the best ending possible under the circumstances, which I probably would still say was the NCR, because at the bare minimum they do seem to mostly mean well, even if they don't actually always follow through effectively. Dan of Nerdcubes recently said he's starting to lose interest in YouTube to some extent and wanting to move on to bigger and better things. Do you feel the same? Personally, no. Like, I know a lot of people get burnt out on this platform and move out. That's not where I am right now. It might be where I am down the line, but for the moment at least, no. I'm pretty happy with continuing to make the sort of videos that I make. John, Astroneer is going from early access to full release at the beginning of February. Time for another multiplayer game. Ooh, didn't know Astroneer was about to actually go to a full release. Yeah, definitely we should feature that again. Thank you for flagging that. We will definitely be giving that a look-see. John, I hope you had a good new year so far. I was wondering, seeing as the season's now finished, what did you think of this season of Doctor Who? I'm going to be honest, this was the season of Doctor Who that actually lost me and Claire. We didn't even finish watching it. We didn't get through it. I just am not enjoying the new direction of it. We got as far as the Spider episode, which was so stupid that we just, like, missed the episode the following week, and then we didn't catch it up in time for the next episode, so we were 2 episodes behind, so we didn't have time to sit down and, like, watch those 2 episodes, and then we realised the series was over, and we just hadn't seen any of it, really. We saw, like, the first third, and we just sort of lost interest, and I think it was mainly the writing of the new showrunner. Chris Chibnall, is it? Yeah, I think it's Chris Chibnall. Just because I was worried before he started because he's never actually written a good episode. He's just written some all-right-ish episodes. But, like, I looked over the episodes of Doctor Who he'd written previously, and he'd never actually written one that I'd look at and say, yeah, that's one of the really good ones. So, yeah, unfortunately, we just had a series of not that good episodes, and the Spider episode just completely lost me, because it was the most un-Doctor Who thing I've ever seen. Like this idea of, hey, there's all these spiders that have been mutated here, and the Doctor's way to deal with that is, I know, I'm going to lock all of these spiders in a room where they can't possibly escape from, because then they can have some form of a natural death. So, okay, the spiders are just going to what? Starve to death? Suffocate? Cannibalize each other? Like, the last one will eventually die in agony, surrounded by the corpses of his brethren? Great! Well done, Doctor, you big damn hero. It's just the least Doctor thing imaginable. It's, like, absolutely flipping awful. And then we had, like, the massive spider who'd grown so big that, like, it was basically in agony just being alive. It could barely even breathe, and it was just going to slowly suffocate in horrendous pain and maybe hang on for a certain period of time. And then the American guy showed up with his American gun, and he shot the spider and was like, oh my goodness, how could you do that? That's such a monstrous thing for you to have done. I'm going to glare at you because of what a monstrous... No! He was right! That was the most morally justified thing anyone did in the entire episode. You came across a creature that had accidentally, because of radioactive waste or whatever, been mutated into a giant creature that was literally suffering. Its every breath was agony, and this guy put it out of its misery. That was the right thing to do. Like, it was insane. It was just so weirdly un-Doctor Who-ish. It was like it was written by someone who'd never seen an episode of Doctor Who before. And that just completely lost me. And just, we didn't bother watching the rest of it after that point. We had problems with every single episode. So at some point I'll probably catch up with it. But yeah, unfortunately, I finally ran into the brick wall of an episode of Doctor Who so bad I actually stopped watching. Do you think the return of the Obra Dinn will get a one-off episode at some point? 100% it will. Don't know exactly when, but it will, yes. With everything you've done in your life, what led you to doing YouTube in the first place? The actual thing that made me think of doing it was I saw some of NerdCube's videos, and this was like, you know, before I really watched much YouTube. Like at the time, the only thing I really used YouTube for was watching StarCraft 2, and actually, this was before StarCraft 2, this was also in the days of StarCraft 1. I was watching StarCraft 1 pro matches that were on YouTube. Someone was just uploading them from Korea because I was super into watching Pro StarCraft at the time. So that was all I really used YouTube for. And then I think it might have just been like recommended or something. I can't even remember. I saw Dan of NerdCubed. I saw his 2 videos. I saw the original Farming Simulator video, and I saw 13 Ways to Die in Mass Effect 3. And I remember seeing those videos and thinking, this guy's funny, and being a YouTuber looks fun. I should try making my own videos. And that was back in like 2011 or something. I think it was like 2 years later that I actually tried making my own YouTube videos for the very, very first time. So, yeah, it feels deeply surreal that these days me and Dad are friends and we do videos together on a not a regular basis. That's so flipping weird. But that was what originally made me do it. John, I'd just like to say that I did get into Cambridge to study history, and I need to thank you, as without your influence and Rome Total War's influence, I'd never have realised that ancient history is my passion. Oh, that's so good. That's such good news. Well done, Joshua. Congratulations. And history is a competitive course. Like, that's way more impressive than what I did, because I did classics. And classics, just because so few schools actually teach ancient languages, has a relatively small number of people applying per place. So it's much less competitive. But history is ludicrously competitive. So that's way more impressive. So congratulations, Joshua. That is such an achievement. Well done. Second, do you think it's feasible to suggest that Mass Effect 3 is the best Mass Effect game despite its flaws? I don't think you can do that. Personally, my favourite is Mass Effect 1 still, because I think it's got the most interesting and subtle storytelling, where rather than it just being, hey, we have to go to the Junkyard Planet to get the man who lives on the Junkyard Planet. Oh no, Junkyard Planet man is dead. but he, like, made a different Krogan. We'll take him back, and he shall be the team member instead of Junkyard Planet. I'm sorry, I'm being very unfair to Mass Effect 2 there. But, like, Mass Effect 2's story, and to an extent Mass Effect 3's story, were very much siloed. Like, this is the bit of the game where you will now deal with the Geth and the Quarian problem. Okay, this is now the bit of the game where you will deal with the Tachanka problem and all of that business. It was very much, okay, this chapter, right, that's over, next chapter. Mass Effect 1, I like the fact it was much more organic, that you travelled around the galaxy and, like, each planet that you went to gave you a bit of information, like the language that you needed to properly interpret the information on Ilos, the location of the relay that could take you to Ilos. You know, every different place gave you a different piece of the puzzle, so you could do it in any order, and as you actually went to each location, you learnt more about this single plot. So I just preferred the way Mass Effect 1 actually held together, and also the fact that Mass Effect 1 was much more of an RPG, and I prefer Mass Effect 1's combat as well. In particular, the way the biotics work in Mass Effect 1 I think is much better than it is in Mass Effect 2, and slightly better than it is in Mass Effect 3, though 3 is an improvement over 2. I mean, I guess you could make an argument that Mass Effect 3 is better than Mass Effect 2, just because Mass Effect 3, aside from the ending, has some really good moments. Like, it takes the stuff that Mass Effect 1 and 2 laid out, and it comes up with some spectacular endings to it. Like the ending of Tachanka with Mordin, and the ending of Rannoch with Legion and Tali is wonderful. It's some wonderful, wonderful stuff. So, this is something I want to dive into in the Mass Effect 3 is Better Than You Think video, by the way. So, at some point that will exist. What's the best book and film that you and Claire have introduced to each other? I can't think of a film that Claire has introduced me to off the top of my head, but in terms of books, that would be The Assassin's Apprentice or like The Farseer. Okay, whatever those books are by Robin Hobb. All of the books in the universe of Robin Hobb, because Claire gave me The Assassin's Apprentice thinking that it would be a good book for me. And since then, I've read literally everything Robin Hobb has ever written. And that includes what must be like 18 to 20, like massive 800-page mega books inside that universe. So, yeah, I really fell in love with that universe. So I have Claire to thank for that. Right, over to Claire. And as I could come up with a book, but not a film, Claire, could you come up with a film, just so we've got one of each here?
This one's pretty easy, actually. If you'd said best TV, I would have had a lot to choose from, because John's introduced me to a lot of, like, very British comedy TV that I really, really love. But the best film that John's introduced me to, 100% Hot Fuzz, because I missed it when it first came out, and it's one of John's favorite movies, and when he heard that I hadn't seen it, he was like, wait, we need to sit down and watch this tonight. And then we did, and it was really, really great. The writing is really, really great. The, like, setup and payoff of jokes in the first and second half of the movies are just amazing. Like, it basically leaves no stone unturned. Like, every single little bit of the first half of the movie gets paid off amazingly in the second half. So, yeah, I love that film.
If you were to choose one food and one drink to have for the rest of your life, what would they be and why? Ooh, interesting. I think I'll go for a nice risotto, because I do enjoy a good risotto. I've always loved a good risotto. And a nice Pimm's and lemonade, because then I can get myself pleasantly tipsy, and then even if I get a bit bored of the risotto, it won't matter, because I'll be a bit tipsy, so I'll probably be thinking very positive thoughts about the risotto regardless. Is there a backstory behind your fear of Venus flytraps, or is it just an innate phobia you happen to get? I'm not sure I really need a backstory for this, to be honest. It's a plant that's got teeth. Plants shouldn't have teeth, alright? That's not a thing plants should have. It's wrong and weird and terrifying. And, like, you know, a plant doesn't have a sense of mercy or right or wrong. It doesn't have eyes, so it can't, like, look at you or make any judgments. It's just basically a killing machine. It's just an automated killing machine that will snap down on you and never let you go because it has no reason to. Because it's barely even sentient. And, I don't like it, I don't like it, I don't like it. John, is there any chance of Red Dead 2 coming back? I honestly don't know. Like, I think I had a lot more problems with that game than some people did. Like, I think it was a very admirable game, and there was a lot that I really enjoyed about it. But honestly, I just enjoyed bumming around in the world. I didn't enjoy actually playing the missions for the most part because they were so linear. But I did enjoy just kind of bumming around in the world. But I can't make a series out of just wandering around, bumming around in the world, not actually moving the story along, because the world is static until it actually gets moved along by more plot stuff. being done. Plus, it sounds like it would be a real grind for me to actually get to the bits that people seem to think are crazy. Like, at one point on Twitter, I was discussing this, and one of the replies I got was, hang on, was it like it gets good at the beginning of the 4th or the 5th act? I can't remember. Someone said like the 4th or the 5th act. Like, I've got to the beginning of the 3rd act, and that took me like 8 videos of like an hour long each, and that was with lots being cut out. Like, I think there was like 20 hours it took to get me to the beginning of the 3rd act. Like, if I've put 20 hours into a game, and I'm feeling like I don't really want to play anymore, and honestly, since I stopped playing it, I've not, like, at any point felt, I really wish I was playing a bit more Red Dead Redemption 2. That's just a sign it's not a game for me. It's not a game for me. If I were to do any more of it, it would just be being done out of obligation. It would be a chore to me, and I wouldn't be having a good time, and it wouldn't make a good video. So, I could, and maybe I'll do a live stream at some point to kind of wrap it up. Because I think, like, you know, you probably could get away with doing a live stream where it's just the wandering around, exploring the world, bumming around, having fun just exploring. You could do that for a live stream for a few hours, absolutely. But I don't think I could actually make a full series work on that at this point. I think it's just going to quietly be left as it is. With Three Kingdoms and Imperator coming out soon, Stellaris and Crusader Kings 2 still receiving new DLC and a backlog of older Total War and Paradox games to try out, how do you plan to manage the balance of grand strategy games on the channel? It's an excellent question and one I struggle with a lot. But it's fine, because in all fairness, Stellaris and Crusader Kings 2 in particular, yes, especially Crusader Kings 2, the rate the DLC comes out is pretty slow, and it kind of sounds like, from what they were talking about with Holy Fury, that might be the last DLC pack for Crusader Kings 2, because it does sound very distinctly like they're actually thinking there's only so many systems we can pile on top of each other before we can't really add anything else on. So I suspect we might not necessarily even see another great big story pack. We might see another small thing for Crusader Kings 2, but I suspect Holy Fury might be the last really big series of additions to it. So yeah, I suspect that might be the case. Stellaris tends to get its big upgrades pretty slowly. They're going to be working on just like stability and some minor stuff for a while, and then there'll be a very small story pack that doesn't justify a new series, so it's going to be a long time before the next big expansion that's as big as like Apocalypse or Megacorp. So those tend to be pretty well spaced out as well. Total War games come out very, very slowly indeed, and Imperator will be the focus when it shows up too. So, you know, hopefully we should be able to just about handle it. What's on your calendar that you're excited for coming up outside of the channel? Honestly, if it's a game and I'm excited for it, it will be on the channel, because there's no reason why it wouldn't be. But in terms of, like, anything in general, the stuff I've got pinned on the calendar is all the Marvel films. I'm so excited for this year's Marvel films. For Captain Marvel leading into Endgame, and then, oh, how flipping good does Spider-Man 2 look, though? Spider-Man 2 looks so flipping good. Yeah, I'm really excited for all 3 of the next Marvel films. They're going to be great. Up is not jumped into a video about Fallout New Vegas with a VR mod. Did you have any interest in experiencing that for yourself? Oh god, no, because I discussed this with him, and it sounds like an absolute nightmare, which is appropriate because his video was called Fallout New Vegas VR is a Nightmare, and it really does sound like it is, because it requires like hours and hours and hours of setup, and the end result is weird because it wasn't properly made for VR. So like the map rotates weirdly and flickers weirdly, and like what you're seeing doesn't match up to like the movements you're making, so it's not been properly set up to work like that. And for me, it would just be motion sickness central, and I don't think it would look particularly good to you. Like, it would look much worse than just standard New Vegas. So I feel like that's not really a good thing for me to do. If you had to have the perfect Pokemon team of 6 Pokemon, what would they be? Okay, my favourite Pokemon are Exeggutor. I love Exeggutor. Dragonite's awesome. Tyranitar is flippin' awesome. Kingler, flippin' love Kingler. Eevee, just because Eevee's cute. And I have always liked Infernape. Infernape's pretty badass, so yes, we'll go for that. And if you had to sing one song perfectly in order to save your own life, what song would you sing? Oh, Skater Boy. Because it's the best song ever written, and I sing it beautifully every time. So that would just be easy survival. I'd be mad to go for anything else. John, I'm excited for Stellaris Console Edition coming out in a month. How do you feel about Paradox doing this, and any advice for new players? I'll tell you what I'm most interested in. It's performance, because Stellaris like stutters like crazy on really high-end PCs. So I don't know how the hell they're going to make it behave on a console. I'm not sure whether, like, you know, you'll be restricted to smaller galaxies or something. And yeah, bear in mind, it's going to be the old version 1.7. They're starting with that, and then they're going to roll it forward as time goes by. So yeah, I guess we go back to old Stellaris rules here, which is minerals are king. anything you can do to get more minerals, get more flipping minerals, and just keep piling up more and more fleet. Like, if you're under fleet capacity, you shouldn't be. Any opportunity to boost fleet capacity, you flipping take it. And as soon as you've got fleet capacity, you get the minerals to fill it. You should be floating the biggest fleet you're capable of floating at any given moment. There is no reason to not be in possession of the biggest fleet you can manage. Definitely, because it's all about the fleet ultimately. Hopefully one day it won't be, but for the time being, and especially back in 1.7, it 100% was. John, I've got another fuck, marry, kill for you. Your choices are Todd Howard, Theresa May, and Evie. Right. Okay. So, this one's difficult. Because, as some of you may be aware, because I've been dating Claire for a decade, I'm straight. And on that list is one guy, one woman, and a small squirrel cat creature. So, okay, let's actually just start making some exclusions here. I can't fuck Evie, because that would just be weird and wrong. Okay? Definitely can't do that. And I can't kill Evie, because Evie is adorable. But then Evie's the only one that's not human. That's the problem. Evie's the one that's not human. I mean, even though Evie's adorable, like, if I'm actually treating this ludicrous thought experiment seriously, which damn it I'm determined to, if I had to choose to kill one thing out of two humans and one small whatever the hell an Evie is, I would, with great reluctance, have to go for Evie, because I rank human life more highly than squirrel cat life or whatever. And I think that's right. Right? Is that right? I think that's the right way to think about things, hopefully. So I guess by default, we have to kill Evie, which means then we're into fucking marry. So then that one's a bit easier. So I'd definitely rather spend more time with Todd Howard than Theresa May. So I have to marry Todd Howard, because then that's fine. Like, over the years, I can start giving him advice for how to make Fallout better. And that means I fuck Theresa May, which, while deeply unpleasant, would at least mean that is in line with my own sexuality. So, okay, I guess that works then. Yes, we'll go for that. Assuming BioWare survives long enough to make another Mass Effect, what do you think the basic plot should be? Okay, so definitely shouldn't be New Galaxy. They tried that. That just didn't flipping work. I think potentially a side story alongside the existing one could work quite nicely, because then we can actually have it, just gently feed into it. Like, I think this character, whoever the new character is, they should never meet Shepard directly, but they should be able to meet some of the supporting cast on occasion. Like, for example, we know that Garrus spent a lot of time being rogue under the radar, and we know that Tali spent some time like working with Quarian Special Forces, going around doing a few bits and pieces with them. So like, I think the new character could run in some of the supporting cast of Mass Effect, and I think it could be, yeah, like say we could have a story out in, what was it called? The bit of space, was it Terminus Space? The bit that Omega's in, the bit that kind of Shepard just occasionally nips into to do the odd mission, but never actually hangs around in for long. Like, we could have some stuff going out in Terminus Space. That might be fun, because, like, out there's going to be a whole bunch of stuff that was barely explored in the game, but it's still affected by the Reapers. We could still have a very effective story set anywhere alongside the Mass Effect franchise that means we could have certain fan favourite characters making the odd appearance, but it shouldn't be depending on fan favourite characters. They should make the odd appearance, and like sometimes, just to mix things up, like, a really important character from the main game could show up very briefly, just like, in the background saying a few words as part of a crowd, and then we never actually get to go over and see them, because that's way more naturalistic than it being a big deal that this character who isn't actually that important necessarily, because like Tali was a fairly minor deal until she happened to be made the Secret Admiral in Mass Effect 3. Like, she could just be there, no one's making a big deal about her in the slightest, she's just in the background, and when you have a conversation with her, it's a very short conversation with her. That would be really fun and interesting, and yeah, we could flesh out the galaxy a lot more that way, because so far we've been very much focused on, the Citadel and the Systems Alliance and all of that. Let's see what was going on out in the Outer Rim, if that's the right term, for the Mass Effect galaxy. What was going on out in the more lawless space? All of that business. That might be fun. Telling a slightly smaller story. That could be good. On a scale of 1 to 100, how excited are you for Outer Worlds? I'd say, just on grounds of the pedigree of the team, like an 85. And I'll make that higher once we actually see some real details and gameplay footage. Right now we haven't seen enough to justify anything higher than about an 85. Now, 2 interesting suggestions here, which I have 2 very good reasons for. Cuphead, no, I just don't enjoy that sort of thing, because is Cuphead a bullet hell game? It's kind of a bullet hell game. Not my cup of tea. I just don't enjoy that. Hey, here's an insanely difficult boss you need to learn all the patterns for and diddly diddly dee. Not my cup of tea. Catherine, I received review code for. They wanted me to make a video of Catherine, but specifically told me if I do make the video of Catherine, the Atlas Japan bot will put a copyright strike on my channel, but then I can write to them and they promise that they will have it taken off again. But like, a copyright strike is not something to joke around with, so I was like, okay, I can't make that video because there's too many health implications to the channel of having a copyright strike. And they were like, you know what, that's fair enough. I probably wouldn't either, because this was a PR person I was speaking to. So, yeah, Catherine's a bit weird, which is, if you actually put footage of Catherine up on YouTube, they're pretty much saying, we will try and give you a copyright strike, but we promise we'll take it down again afterwards. So I kind of politely declined. Bit of an odd one, that. What is your favourite console system of all time? GameCube. GameCube was so good and it had so many classics on it, and it was a great console. And, to my mind, it was the last console that existed before consoles just started moving towards being slightly weak PCs, which I think there was way too much of in the generations that followed. Though I guess the Xbox 360 was kind of an exception to that. The Xbox 360 was not constantly demanding updates and downloads and diddly diddly dee. The Xbox 360, for the most part, you could just put a disc in it and the disc would have the game on it and you could play the game off the disc. So maybe I'm being a little bit unfair there, but I personally have fonder memories of the GameCube. I think the GameCube also contains some of the best games Nintendo ever flipping made, like the original Metroid Prime, Zelda the Wind Waker, which is my favourite Zelda game, Eternal Darkness, which I consider an absolute classic, Skies of Arcadia Legends was on the GameCube and never got ported anywhere else because the original Skies of Arcadia was Dreamcast. So, yeah, I believe GameCube was the only console that ever got the Legends version, which was the best version of Skies of Arcadia, with the exception of the music, which sadly was very slightly lower quality than on the Dreamcast for some slightly mysterious reason. I think they like slightly compressed the music wrong or something, because, yeah, it's slightly higher quality on Dreamcast. So, yeah, I've got to say GameCube for me. I love that thing. In fact, I've still got it. It's right over there. It's to the right of me on my little shelf over there, ready to be plugged in and played any flipping second. John, I have a question about getting through a period where I'm not able to work on what I want. How do you get through that? Well, I hope I'm about to answer this question correctly, because I'm not quite 100% sure I'm completely clear on what the question is. But if you're meaning that you're going through a bit of like a creative dry spell and are struggling to work on your own projects, what I've always found is I need to do something creative that I enjoy in my spare time. So, like, when I was doing my office work that I was discussing earlier, before I did YouTube, I used to write a lot. Then I started doing YouTube and I stopped writing because I had a creative outlet in the form of YouTube. So, I enjoyed making these creative videos. And these days, the reason I'm probably able to do what is slightly stupid hours working on YouTube is because I still enjoy it. I still find it creative and interesting and enjoyable to do. So as a result of that, it's fine for me to be able to put lots of hours into this thing. So I'd probably know that I was starting to get burnt out on YouTube if I ever felt I needed to do something creative because I was starting to feel bored with making YouTube videos, which thankfully isn't a position I'm in right now. So I'd encourage you to just find something else, even if it's not like a productive thing in any sense. Just find something you enjoy doing that's not passive consumption of media. It needs to be something creative, whether that's drawing, even if you're terrible at drawing, whether it's writing, even if you're bad at writing and think what you're writing is not very good. Like, it just needs to be something that's a creative outlet. I'd recommend that because that always works for me anyway. Oh crikey, here's one hell of a question as well as we come up onto the end. One of my favourite characters from my brief foray into studying classics were the Gracchi brothers. What's your take on them? Oh, blimey. Okay, I can't answer that question. There's way too much to unpick there. I'd just be talking probably in circles for hours. What I will say is, it's a mess. And there's no good guy, no bad guy in that situation. The story of the Gracchi is the story of various slightly grubby, unpleasant forces colliding when populism and violence and the establishment and utter corruption all sort of smash their heads together and leave a lot of bloodstains on the ground. It's an unpleasant story where every single person involved probably thought they were the hero. Like so many tragic stories, unfortunately. Yeah, every person in that story almost certainly thought they were doing the right thing, and it all ended not well. I can't summarise that, I'd be talking flipping hours. If you want to get like a really good like high level overview, just to introduce you to it by the way, I would recommend Extra Credits in their Extra History series. They did like a handful of videos on the Grackeye that were actually a very good little introduction. They do a lot of good introductions to a lot of things by the way. I do like those series, they're very, very good indeed. So yeah, I would recommend potentially giving that a look-see if you're unfamiliar with that period of history at all, but oh yeah, I can't summarise all of that. I could just, babble on for a long time, but it will probably not be helpful to anyone. And finally, are we going to see the return of the Hedgehog in 2019? Well, as I say, we've already got a Valentine's Day video planned, so I would not bet against it. Also, I'm pretty confident I've missed a question. I'm sure I saw a question when I was skimming through earlier that I haven't answered, so I don't know how I've missed this. But I'm certain someone asked, was there a mini-series or a midweek series that didn't do very well, that didn't become like a full series, and whether that was disappointing to me? I'm sure I'm not going mad. I'm sure someone asked that question, but somehow I just managed to actually skim past it. So just in case that's a question that does exist, and I'm not just making up further questions for myself because I've gone completely flipping mad, which is entirely possible, honestly, not so much. Like, the only ones I can think of were Watch Dogs and Watch Dogs 2 did kind of weirdly low numbers, and I wasn't quite sure 100% why they kind of dropped off so rapidly. The biggest one that always surprised me, and this one sticks with me, was Avery Attorney. Because Avery Attorney was fun, but like after the first part, which did alright but not spectacularly, views just dropped off a cliff. Like no one came back for part 2 of that. So that series was just quietly taken out behind the sheds and shot. So yeah, that didn't go very well. I was always surprised with that one. I thought that one would go better. Like plenty of little kind of like stupid narrative novelty things I've done did way better than that when they kind of went into their second part. So I'm not quite sure why that one ended up doing so poorly, which was a shame because it did have Claire actually lending her voice to a stupidly over-the-top French cat. So yeah, it was a shame that never went anywhere. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end. Thank you very, very much for joining me in the January sort of 2019 Patroncast. I almost said 2018 again there. I just managed to catch myself. at the end, but it's fine. I caught it, so it's absolutely fine. January is dead. Hooray, it's February. And yeah, I've got some things planned to hopefully get the channel back into good shape in February. The big Fallout 76 video essay should be a big help with that. So yeah, watch this space. That should be coming up in about 2 weeks. I might need to push it back an extra week to the 23rd, but I really don't want that to slip into March. I'm going to really try hard to get that out in February. So hopefully that will actually be happening before the next Patroncast. And that will be good. That'll be really good, because if that does even a fraction as well as Fallout 3 is better than you think, then yeah, that will be a real big help to the channel going forward. But it'll be fine. Everything will be fine. I've got a good month planned. I've got some really, really cool videos coming up. Hopefully you will join me for those. But in the meantime, I've been John. This has been many a true nerd. This has been the January sort of 2019 Patroncast. Thank you very much, and goodbye.